Okay, so this stuff over here was from the video yesterday, and you did one example problem, okay? So we're gonna do another tangent. So to find the period of tangent, you do, or cotangent, either one, set of 2 pi, it's pi divided by the number in front of x. Okay, so this stuff is all from the video from yesterday you're supposed to watch. So we'll just do some examples today. Okay, then these have asymptotes. Asymptotes, those are your lines that the graph can't cross. So on tangent, to find your asymptotes, you set the x part equal to negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2, and then you solve. So solve for x. Divide by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by a half. So I would have negative pi over 4. And then divide by 2, or multiply by half. Positive pi over 4. Okay. Now, as far as amplitude, there's no such thing as amplitude on these. But since our number in front is 3, I need to go at least like a little bit above that. Because these graphs actually look like cubics, where they go on forever. And I'm at negative pi over 4 to pi over 4. And this is actually the length of one period. Because the distance between negative pi over 4 and pi over 4 is pi over 2, and that's the length of your period. And we want 2 periods, so I'm going to have to make my other one. Okay, and if a period is pi over 2, and I ended at pi over 4, my second period is going to end at 3 pi over 4. How do I get that? Anybody know? Okay, let's have it pi over 4. If I take pi over 4 plus pi over 2, so 1/4 plus a half is 3/4. So my period ends at 3 pi over 4. Okay, how do we divide periods into how many things?
4.
Fours. So into fours. Same thing like you do with sine and cosine. Figure out what you're counting by. You take your period, divide by 4. So it'd be like multiplying by the reciprocal. So every spacing we're counting is by pi over 8. So negative pi over 4, which would be like negative 2/8, plus 1/8, so this would be negative pi over 8. Add pi over 8, I'm at 0. Add pi over 8, I'm at pi over 8. Then I'm at 2 pi over 8, which was pi over 4. Then 3 pi over 8. 4 pi over 8, which would be pi over 2. 5 pi over 8. And 6 pi over 8, which is 3 pi over 4.
Mrs. Whaley, why do you have to have the 3 pi over 4?
You have to have 2 periods. Okay. Just like sine and cosine, we're going to graph 2 periods. If you want to graph more, you can. Okay. So with sine and cosine, we only use these 4 points. Because 2 of those are undefined, when you're figuring out tangent and cotangents, you're actually using also these 45 angles. So, if you use your calculator, share your calculators in radians, or your unit circle, which you're supposed to be starting to memorize. Okay, and because tangent is equal to y over x, so tangent is y over x, at all of these 45s, if I take y divided by x, I'm either going to get 1, on quadrant 1 and quadrant 3 you get 1, quadrant 2 and quadrant 4 you get negative 1. Okay. So negative pi over 8 times 2 is negative pi over 4, so that's down here. Tangent of negative pi over 4 is negative 1 times negative 3 is 3. Zero times 2 is 0, so it'll be right here. Okay, to find the tangent, y divided by x, so 0 divided by 1 would be 0, times negative 3 is 0. And if I plug in pi over 8, times 2 is pi over 4, so I'll be up here. Tangent of that, y divided by x, those are the exact same, so it'll be 1 times negative 3, negative 3. So this graph looks like that. Okay, all cycles repeat themselves. So like in my second cycle, it's going to be exact same order. 3, then 0, then negative 3. Okay, and they're not straight lines, they look like cube graphs.
So you always start after the asymptote? Like you
Yes,
put-
yeah. Because if you plugged in the asymptote, when we plug this in here, we're going to get where we're up to undefined, like you get this, well, the first one you get down here. Okay, and that will give you, if you take y divided by x, negative 1 divided by 0, that's undefined. That's why it has an asymptote. Okay?
Can you do how you find negative pi over 8?
How I plugged it in?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I plug that in here for x, times 2, so that'd be negative 2 pi over 8, which simplifies to be negative pi over 4. So I went backwards to here. And then tangent y over x, so I took this number divided by that one. So I get negative 1, and then I multiply by negative 3. If you do it in your calculators, make sure your calculator's in radians. I think it's easier to do it by hand because when you get to cotangent, cosecant, secant, they don't have calculator buttons. Any other questions on that one? Okay, the only way cotangent's different is the asymptotes are at 0 and pi. Everything else is the same. Okay? It's either going to curve up or they're going to curve down. And I know I said this on the video yesterday about how do I remember which ones are which. I always remember cotangent, cosecant, both have co, so I just remember co 0. I remember these are at 0 and those are at pi over 2's. It's just me. However you want to memorize it, I really don't care. Okay, so cotangent of x over 3. Period of tangent cotangent would be pi, so you take pi divided by the number in front of x, so pi divided by 1/3. So it would be pi times 3. It would be 3 pi. So to find your asymptotes, set the x part equal to 0, and then the x part equal to pi. So to solve this, I'd multiply both sides by 3. So 0 times 3 is 0. Multiply by 3, 3 pi. Okay, and since my number runs 2, like when I'm doing my graph, just make sure you go up to like at least 3. Or if you don't wanna go that high on your graph, just make sure you like leave room to finish the graph off above it. Okay, so if a period is 3 pi, and I need 2 periods, where would my second period end at? It will end at 6 pi. So I ended at 3 pi. I add 3 pi to it because that's how long my period is. So I'm ending at 6 pi. And each period gets divided into 4. Okay, so if my period is 3 pi, I take my period and divide by 4. That's what I'm counting by. So I would have 3 pi over 4. If I add another 3 pi over 4, I'm at 6 pi over 4. But those are both divisible by 2. So 3 pi over 2. Then I'd have 9 pi over 4. Then 12 pi over 4, which was 3 pi. Then 15 pi over 4. And if I add another 3/4, that's 18 pi over 4, but those are both divisible by 2. 9 pi over 2. And then I have 21 pi over 4. And then 24 pi over 4 is 6 pi. Okay, now cotangent. You can't plug cotangent into a calculator. Like there's no like specific button. It's 1 divided by the tangent. So if you use your calculator, problem will be when you get zeros because there's okay. So if you got a tangent that says error, that's because the tangent's undefined, but the cotangent would be 0. So like at this point right here, tangent would be 1 over 0, which is undefined, but a cotangent would be 0 over 1, which is 0. So if you use a calculator, you're getting errors probably because the reciprocal of that is 0. I just use the unit circle because I think that's the easiest way. So 3 pi over 4 times 1/3, so 3's cancel, so I'm at pi over 4, which is up here. Cotangent, x over y. So x over y, I get 1 times 2 is 2. 3 pi over 2 times 1/3. 3's cancel, so it's pi over 2, which is up here. Cotangent, 0 over 1 would be 0, times 2 is 0. Okay, then 9 pi over 4 times the third, 3 pi over 4, which is over here, would be -1 times 2 is -2. And then the cycle repeats. Alright, questions over tangent for a minute? Right now?